And definitely, I agree that in certain sectors, Malaysia and the Malaysian economy is better equipped to face the crisis compared to previous years. One, banks, as Khairy mentioned just now, are better regulated, better capitalized. The financial sector is also less exposed to the toxic assets such as subprime lending, speculative hedge funds, and obviously there the parallel sector of the Islamic banking sector provides relief in basically all the entire Islamic financial sector is asset-based and it's not tied in with all these problematic assets that you see in the West. And also, Malaysian firms are flushed with cash and has high dividend yields. And definitely, I mean, if you've been reading what is happening in the US, what Barack Obama is doing in the United States, the neoliberal economic model, which was, a year ago, was seen as the only way forward for the world, is certainly dead. And I think that it's also important to note that we have to measure ourselves, as Dr. Aslam mentioned just now, in terms of competitiveness. And while we may be, in terms of facing the immediate economic crisis, we are better equipped. But I think the long-term trend that we have been seeing for the past, not just the past few years, but perhaps the past decade or so, and certainly nothing seems to change going on forward, is our competitiveness, global competitiveness. To give you an example, Burma, I would reckon, is not affected as well by the global economic crisis, certainly not as much as perhaps the United States. But does that mean that Burma has a better economy than the United States? Even, as Surah Khairy mentioned just now, the first quarter 2009, our economy, our GDP contracted by 6.2%, whereas the Singapore economy contracted by 3.6%. Singapore is very much more exposed to the entire international financial system compared to Malaysia. And this is the largest fall that we've experienced in the fourth quarter of 1998. What Khairy said, we could have foreseen this, but actually in March, the government was reiterating that the GDP growth for this year would be +1 or -1%. But now it has been revised to -4 to -5%. So we didn't, certainly the official figures did not suggest anything like this. And why this happened, definitely fall of exports, as he has mentioned just now. We are a trading economy, and the export market has fallen drastically because of the economic crisis. And also something that our economy is now becoming more and more reliant on oil revenues. Oil revenues now make up to 40% of the government revenue. It has climbed up steadily to 40%. And from being a very dynamic economy which relies on trade, relies on industries, relies on various sectors of the economy, now we become increasingly, again, a country that is relying on this. So that's a big problem that we face in our growing budget deficit. Well, one kind of alluded to just now how this is a major issue that we face. But we must realize that during the times of plenty, from 2001 to 2008, although the government at the beginning, the previous Prime Minister at the beginning stated that he wanted to reduce and in fact have a balanced budget within a certain number of years, that target was not met. And until today, throughout all these years, we have been suffering from a budget deficit from the previous economic crisis. We do not have to learn about economic cycle. We do not have to read John Maynard Keynes, the general theory of employment, interest, and money to understand about boom and bust and how to manage our budget. We just have to go back and read the Quran and see Surah Yusuf, where in the Surah it was clearly stated how the Prophet Yusuf, when the king of Egypt at that time, said that he had a dream where 7 cows were being devoured by 7 lean cows, and 7 green ears of corn, and 7 dry ears of corn. He saw in the dream. And he asked his nobles to explain to him what was the meaning of his dream. And eventually the only one who could explain and interpret his dream was the Prophet Yusuf, who said that for 7 consecutive years you shall sow as usual, and the harvest you reap, you shall live in years, except a little of which you may eat. And then after that will come 7 hard years that will devour what you have laid in advance for them, except a little of that which you have gathered. So this principle of saving, of prudence, during the time of economic growth, when we are having a budget surplus, and then having an expansionary fiscal policy during times of crisis, has been established in the Quran from the beginning. And unfortunately, we did not learn that lesson. And now, because we are facing double whammy of the economic crisis, as well as the fall of the price of commodities, which is a major source of our income, now it's estimated that we are going to suffer from a higher budget deficit, where up to 10% in 2010 in certain estimates. So this is something which is very, very worrying, because it will affect our ratings, it will affect how much we can invest in the future if we continue to run a budget deficit. And the other worrying thing is that not only that, borrowings for the government doubled from 20 billion ringgit in 2007 to 37 billion ringgit in 2008, and it is expected to double again to 80 billion ringgit in 2010. And foreigners right now are selling government bonds. Last year, from May to November 2008, foreign bond holders sold Malaysian government bonds worth about 60 billion ringgit was being sold. So this is, I think, something which we have to factor in. And the other thing is that while our budget increased all these years, the expenditure doubled from 114 billion in 2003 to 214 billion in 2010. That's the forecast. But the development expenditure only increased from 38 billion to 47 billion. So a lot of the increase was in operational expenditure, via gaji, maintenance and all that, which does not go into building new schools, does not go into building new universities, does not go into building new ports and whatsoever. So all this was simply maintenance, and it increased by such a large figure, which is worrying, because we want to know that all the resources, all the wealth that God has given us should be spent in the right areas to build the capacity for economy in order to move forward. So I think those are two things which I think we should focus on to look into how we face the future. We have to remember that why I mentioned Burma just now was that in 1960s, both Burma and the Philippines were perhaps two of the most developed economies in this region. Burma had the best university at that time, University of Recruit. It was even better than IIUM, which was again at that time a very, very good university. They had a lot of doctors, they had a lot of teachers, they were blessed with a lot of resources. The Philippines as well had a very developed economy after the Second World War. But because of poor economic policy, because of authoritarian political models, unfortunately these two countries, perhaps Philippines has recovered to a certain extent, but certainly Burma is now an economic, political and social basket case that no one needs to go deep into in order to understand. Everyone knows the state Burma is in. So the danger is that while in 1960 people in Malaya at that time were earning at par with people in Taiwan, were earning at par with people in Korea and people in Singapore. Now people in Singapore are earning 5 times. People in Taiwan are earning 3 times, and people in Korea are earning twice more than Malaysians, with or without the economic crisis. So we need to look at this issue of competitiveness, how we face the challenges of the future in terms of the long-term development, in terms of where we want to head in the future. Certainly, as I mentioned just now, I'm not denying the fact that we have learned lessons from what we faced from the 1997-1998 economic crisis, but what we need to really think about is how to build our competitiveness over the long run. Because while we may face the crisis successfully, we might lose the entire battle of being a competitive and developed nation in the future over the long run. Thank you.